Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back. A couple minutes until it's 9, and then we will begin the review session, part 1. So I hope everyone's doing well, having a good week to this point. And just get ready, and we'll be ready to do this in just a few moments. Hey Eva, good to see you. Hey Kelly, good morning. Okay guys, just a second here. Give me one moment. I'm just doing something in another window before I officially begin the review. Eddie. Eddie's up there meowing. Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Hi, Cameron, Drew, Lucy, everybody else. Welcome, one and all. So it's Wednesday, it's December 9th. Today is part 1 of the review session that we're going to have. So we have 2 different review sessions to cover as much of the study guide as possible today, and then, of course, Friday. And then after that, it's just the final exam. So I've sent the study guide to everybody. You guys have received that over last weekend. So what I thought might be useful in terms of just getting us all to focus on the study guide information together would be to do this little dual platform thing that I sometimes do in these classes. So I'm going to drop a link here in our chat. It's going to be a link to a Zoom meeting. Basically, I want to have the 2 different platforms working at once. So I'm going to keep recording this YouTube live session so that you can go back to it later and it'll still remain up on the channel archived. But I also want to run a Zoom meeting simultaneously so that people who are here can see the shared screen, and I'll display the study guide and we can refer to it together. So anyways, you can allow this window to keep being active in your browser, and then just you'll have 2 windows open, one with Zoom and one with YouTube. So here is the link I'm talking about. Go ahead, click this. Wait, did I? Maybe, hold on. I don't think I actually pasted it properly because it's not showing that I can't. Okay, so hold on one thing. I got to do this again. Let's try that again. Okay, the second one, not the first one there. If you could use that second link, and then I will be right there with you guys at that meeting. Okay, so click it, please. Okay, I see you guys arriving here into this Zoom meeting, so good. Come one and all. Let me share the screen really fast. All right. Okay. Right. So just kind of started around here. Now, So I've got the chat window visible here, as you guys can see in your shared screen. So let me just ask some questions while we're all here. Can somebody tap into this chat on Zoom and just that can confirm that you can hear me and that the camera's working fine? And also, can you let me know you're seeing the shared screen? Everyone can see the study guide and that's clear? Okay, good. So sometimes the chat is a little bit faster here, and since we're going to kind of be trying to do a bunch of questions, as many as possible, this will speed things up and we can all see the list. So you can refer to the list that you're looking at on your screen here, or if you've got a printed or separate electronic version of your own copy, you can use that. But anyways, this is review session. So the way I like review sessions to go, if you guys remember with the midterm, is that I prefer for the students to kind of guide me through which questions they want to discuss. And I like for mostly the students to try and supply the information, but I will come in and add clarification or additional information if needed to make sure that everything's complete and accurate. But basically, other than that, you guys will help me direct our course through the study guide. I think there's a couple questions in here that actually I want to tell you I'm not going to ask because they didn't get addressed with sufficient detail. The example of the wax, number 48, we can just cross this one off. I don't think I was able to talk to you about his wax example. It's very interesting, but that's something that had to be cut for time. Other than that, though, unless I see something else off the top of my head that I know we didn't cover, I'll let you know later. But 48 was one that I said, okay, I'm going to have to delete that. Okay, but other than that, let's go. The first half of the study guide extends all the way up until question 40. And then after that, 40 through 82, well, I guess now minus number 48. Those are the second half of the study guide questions. On the test, I'm going to ask you a sampling of these questions on the whole list, but I'm going to take more of them from the second half than the first. On the midterm, I think you had to answer 6 out of like 9 or 10 selected questions. With this final, you're going to have 2.5 hours instead of just 50 minutes. So I'll probably, well, I will have you answer a couple additional questions. So I might have you answer like 8 out of 10 or 11, or maybe 9 out of 11 or 12. But that'll be the breakdown. And suppose if I selected 11 questions, I would probably have like a breakdown of like 7 from the second half of the list and 4 from the first half or something like that. So it'll be kind of like a 2-to-1 ratio pretty much. Therefore, we know that there's more emphasis on the second half of the study guide, but there's still some questions that'll come from the first part. All right, so you can use this chat or your microphone or camera or whatever you want to do, but let's get your questions going, and then we'll move through the study guide in the order that you want. Okay, Eva, you're saying, can we go over number 7? Explain why beliefs derived from sense perception are not certain. Well, okay, but it's not number 7, though. What is the actual number? 47? Oh, okay. Why are beliefs derived from sense perception not certain, and why are beliefs about mathematics not even certain? So, according to Descartes. All right. Well, I don't know. Why? Why is that? Why did he say that you really can't necessarily be certain that anything that you see, taste, touch, hear, or smell is there, is real? How come that's not certain? Why not? What's the reason that could be false? You know, Descartes says, use the method of doubt. The method of doubt says to assume that something's false if it's possible that it's false. Okay, good, dreaming. Exactly. Maybe you're dreaming right now. You think that you're not. You think that you're wide awake and that you're at a review session for your college class at Chapman. But maybe there's no such thing as Chapman. And maybe there's no such thing as college, and there's no such thing as the planet Earth, and everything that you've ever experienced is a big dream. Now, the other thing, you know, we could add more detail. He says that we've had realistic dreams, and when they're happening, you believe they're real. So if this whole existence that you're a part of is some kind of illusion, dream, simulation, whatever, then it would appear the same way it does now. So you can't tell the difference. The other thing, mathematics, mathematics, logic, geometry, that seems like maybe it's more certain because it doesn't even depend on the existence of the external world. It just depends on like concepts of math and shape. But he says even that could possibly be false because first thing he says is maybe God could cause you to get those things wrong because he's all powerful. But then he withdraws that and says, never mind, God wouldn't do it even if he could because he's perfectly benevolent and good. So that would not be consistent with perfect goodness. But an evil demon could have done it. So an evil demon is something like capable of tricking your judgment whenever you do math or whenever you even do fundamental operations in logic or whatever. That could be the source of error when it comes to math, logic, and stuff like that. Okay, so we've got, on the one hand, dreams as the reason for possible doubt over your sense perception, and we've got this external malicious deceiver, which is the possible cause of doubt for math and those things. Okay, so that's number 47 that we've talked about. Let's go ahead and talk about whatever else. So what's next? A lot of questions on this list. If you want me to display different parts of it, but as I was saying, you've got your own copy as well. So I'm just putting it here for your convenience. Maybe I can extend it a little bit and we'll get a little more of the questions on the screen. But go ahead then. So yes, next question. Only you know what you want me to cover. And I'm happy to go over it in whatever order you like. Okay, 82. I'm taking them in the order I see. So first, let's do Jason. The question about Sartre's example with the student. Okay, yeah, so, wait. No, that's not the right number, though. Which number are we talking about? You're talking about, I'm sorry, please give me the number. 77, okay, yeah, so 77, here it is. Sartre's example of the student that asked him for advice during World War II. Your numbers are different from mine. Is that true, Cameron? Maybe it is. Okay, well, let me fix that. I don't want it to be the wrong document. Hold on. Oops, sorry. Here. So it's not this one, huh? Let's see. Well, let me check this. Now is it correct, guys? Think so, right? Cool, yeah. Now it's the corrected version, I guess. Thank you, guys, and sorry for the ambiguity about that, but not to worry. Okay. Let me open this chat thing again because it looks like it got kind of shrunk down. Hold on. Well, anyways. Oh yeah, there we go. Got it. Sorry. So to scroll down the bottom, cool. All right, guys, back to what we were doing. Sorry, thanks again. So it was number 82 that you've referred to, the student that asked Sartre for advice during World War II. Okay, so what is Sartre's overall idea of existentialism? He says that existence precedes essence. There's nothing that's set or established about what kind of person you essentially are until you create that through your own free will. So when you're born, you don't have any essence, but you create it by making free choices because you do have free will. Because of this idea that we each create our own essence, he says that each one of us kind of creates our own version of what we think the best life would be. And according to that idea, there's no other standard about what the best life is apart from what you choose. And that means that even your values and what you think is good, bad, right, and wrong, how you should or shouldn't live, that's all up to you. And it's nothing objective about it. It's all about your own choice and your own decisions. So for a person to make a choice represents that they believe that it's the right thing and it's good from their perspective or their point of view. So that means that there's no actual correct answers as to how a person ought to live in the objective sense. There's just different essences. Each person creates one, and it reflects their sense of how people's lives should be. So when the student comes up to Sartre, what is his dilemma? He's worried about, should I go to the war or should I stay with my mom? If I go to the war, then I'll feel good about helping defend the country, but I'll feel bad maybe about leaving my mom behind. And if I go to help out my mom, then I'm going to feel bad that I neglected to serve in the war. So what's the right choice is his question to Sartre. And now maybe you can tell me the point. What did Sartre say back and why? Like, what kind of answer does Sartre give? in response to this question. What's the so-called right decision that I should make? What is that? You got to tell me. So go ahead. It's definitely one of the most recent things that we all discussed. He said, well, do whatever he feels more valuable to him. But I'm not really just saying what should he do. I mean, it's sort of like what's the right thing to do. And what the right thing is to do depends on what he himself chooses. So his instinct for what he thinks is the right decision is the only standard that can be given as to what the right decision is, because there's no fact about it. It's not like, well, a matter of fact, objectively, is that you should go to war or that you should stay with your mom. Whatever is the right decision depends on the choice of the one individual, because making the choice makes it real that they value that kind of way of being more. So I think, it just seems to me like it's a little reductive to just say, hey, just do whatever you feel like is right, because you have to give the theoretical basis for that, because you have to say something about how whether something's right or wrong itself depends on subjective human choice, and there's no fact about it. So you'd add that little level of nuance to the answer. Okay, but let's continue. So number 72, Eva, imitation game. Okay, first of all, who talked about the imitation game? What author is that? It's Turing, correct. And Alan Turing is out to try and deal with what question? What's the question that his whole essay is asking and trying to answer? Whether or not what? It's always good to sort of set the stage. You've got a question, tell me about who's this author and what is their major point. So could machines have consciousness? Could they think? Could they think and have consciousness like we have? Okay, good. And he says whether this is going to be possible or not depends on how they would perform in this game that he describes. So the imitation game is the test that he imagines for checking and determining whether a computer had consciousness. So how does the game work? If this question were selected, I think the best way for you to answer it would be to pretend, for example, that you are setting up the experiment. Tell me what materials you would need and how you would conduct this experiment. So tell me, run the imitation game. How would you do this? How would you actually conduct the test? What do we need for this test to happen? Just give me that fact. Okay, so have a person and a computer in a separate room from an interrogator, correct. They have to be separated from the computer, sorry, they both have to be separated from the interrogator through a barrier that cannot be seen through. Well then, you got people in rooms, but what are they gonna do? Okay, so the interrogator has to identify the person. Right, we're skipping a couple details, so he has to interview the two subjects on the other side. And all he knows in advance is that one of them is an actual human and the other is a computer, but he doesn't know which one is which. And all he can do is ask questions through written responses are sent back to written questions, and or typed, text. And based on the nature of the answers that he gets, he has to make his best judgment. Who is the human and who is the computer? Now, what did Turing say it would take for us to make the case that these are thinking machines? Like, what results would indicate that these machines can think? Because this is his test. But how does the test verify or disconfirm that we are dealing with a thinking machine? You say we ask questions, and then we have to identify the person, but how do we get to our answer? Can machines think, yes or no? What's the way of finding that out? Okay, so you're saying, Jason, around 50% of incorrect answers? Well, no, not necessarily. We mean incorrect answers. The interrogator doesn't answer any question. The interrogator makes a judgment, though, about which one is the computer and which one is the human. So sort of, right, incorrect identification, that's right. So if the interrogator fails to make the right determination at about 50% rate of failure, like he does this in numerous different trials, and like half the time he can get it right, but then half the time he gets it wrong. Once we get to that point where you just cannot reliably distinguish between the two cases of a human and a computer, then he would say that is the point in time where they are imitating human conversation so well that they cannot be told apart from humans, and that's when we should consider them to be thinking machines. So when they pass the Turing test, the imitation game, when they reach a state that it's just not easy or possible to tell the difference in terms of questions that have been answered, whether they're coming from a human or a machine. Okay, so that's the imitation game. No worries. What else? Sorry, let me scroll back down the bottom there. And oh yeah, so I'm looking back here. The the note that I made earlier when I said to you guys, never mind the wax example. It seems that I've already accounted for that in the version of the list that I actually sent you, which is this one. So we can disregard what I had said before about the omission of number 48, because on the actual list, 48 is a question that I could ask you about. But fine, good. So number 51, you're asking Kylie, let's see. Moving train example of Einstein. Okay, so Einstein in his writing is trying to show that the concept of simultaneous is relative, the relativity of simultaneity. And this example of the moving train is given to show that even two events like two lightning strikes cannot be objectively regarded as happening simultaneously or non-simultaneously. It depends on the condition of the observer and their state of motion. So let's begin with this train thing. He says, imagine that two things happen simultaneously. What are they? What are the two events that are the main two events discussed in this train example? Suppose that what two things happen at the same time? Just let me know. Yeah, lightning strikes. Okay, so not one lightning strike, two lightning strikes, Dennis. So suppose there are two different lightning strikes that occur at 2 points on a train. Well, not on a train, but on a train track. So one, let's say, is over here on the left. One is over here to the right. Let's call them A and B. They're on 2 points of this track. He says if they're simultaneous, how could we determine whether they are? What would be the way of determining through a test that these are simultaneous events? So he says the way of doing it would be to place an observer where? Suppose then we would put an observer at what position? Now that's the next part of our example. In the middle, okay, the midpoint. So here's the midpoint. Let's call it M. Let's place one observer there motionless. Now let's ensure that that observer is far away back so that they can see both points A and B in just one field of vision. Now, assuming that the speed of light is fixed, and that meaning that it always moves at the same velocity and it never varies, that means that the light that comes from point A to M, is going to have the same velocity and speed as the light that travels from B to M. Now, the distance from A to M and the distance from B to M is equivalent because M is the midpoint between them. So if the light ray that travels from A to M travels the same distance as the light ray from B to M, and they move at the same velocity, then in case they reach M at the same moment, meaning he sees them happening at the same time from this standing position, that would be enough for us to deduce that they departed from their two origin points at the same time. It's just kind of like one of those old problems in algebra or math. You know, what we've known is that the distance traveled is the same, we know the rate of travel is the same, and we know they arrive at the end point at the same time. So therefore, wherever they departed from, they must have departed at the same moment. Thus, we regard them as simultaneous, but only relative to this observer. To complete the example, you then have to mention the secondary observer. Now we imagine a second observer. Who is this other person? The second observer is on a moving train that's traveling through the track, and they're going from left to right with constant velocity v. Okay. Now, imagine that this person who's on this moving train surpasses the midpoint between A and B as they travel along the track. While they pass M prime, they're passing it at the same moment that this man standing still at M sees the two events happening simultaneously. And now the whole question, okay, the second observer that's up here on the train, since he's moving past M prime with velocity v while this guy does his observation, would the second observer who's in motion see the two events happening at the same time or not? Question. This guy did, but since he's moving in the direction of B with this velocity, as he surpasses the midpoint, he would not see them happening at the same time, right, Anthony? Because which one would he see first in this example? He would see B first, correct, and then later on he would see A. Maybe just a split second later, but there would be a delay because the light that is traveling from A is going to have to rush farther ahead to reach him since he's moving farther away from it, and the light coming from the point B has a shorter distance to travel to arrive to his eye since he's rushing up closer to it. So in the experience of the second observer, the two events are not simultaneous. It's B before A. For this observer, since he's not running away from the one light ray or he's standing still right in between them, they reach him at the same moment and therefore are seen as simultaneous. And this is kind of just a very strange and interesting fact, that two events which are simultaneous to one observer are not simultaneous to another. And there's no objective fact about which one is correct. It's just relative to the observer because both of them have their own frame of reference given their state of motion and velocity. And once we see that the order of events in space-time is relative, then that opens up all kinds of other strange concepts, like that all the moments of space-time are equally real, and the things that you think of as happening in the future that are not real yet are relative to some frame of reference already existing events. Okay, so yes, moving train, relativity of simultaneity. Two observers, one sees the two events at the same time, the other doesn't. You would explain why that is the case in the example, and then that would be it. Okay, so let's go on. What else? Can we go over 65? Yes, not to worry, Jason. So 65 is all about supervenience physicalism. Physicalism is the view that everything's made out of physical matter. Everything is physical, and there's nothing that's not physical. So we'll get to that, Eva, but first, Jason. So everything's physical. The way of explaining what that means, that everything is physical, is typically to use the idea of supervenience. So supervenience is a concept that is best explained through the example of a dot matrix picture, or another similar structure where there's a big thing, but it's made out of a bunch of tiny little elements or bits. So what's a dot matrix picture? Or something like that. Just give me a basic description of what that kind of thing is, because it's essential to explaining the idea of supervenience. It's a picture made out of smaller components. Okay, so yeah, specifically, it's like a big picture that's made out of an array of little dots of ink. So if you zoomed in very close, you would just see dots of different ink color. When you zoom out, though, you would see that combined together, they all form like a big picture. So anyway, that's a big picture made out of dots. Now, what's the word global feature refer to in this discussion by Daniel Stoljar? Because he's the one who spoke about this. What is a global feature? What's that terminology mean? So this is the next thing you have to say in order to answer this question. Well, it's not really, no, Jason. Okay, so kind of closer there, Anthony. You're saying, Jason, what the picture's supposed to represent, but the picture doesn't necessarily represent just one thing. So like if you have a picture that has like people on the beach, and then there's some people in the water that are surfing, and there's other people that are on the like shore that are just laying out and sunbathing. Like one of the global features is the surfer. One of the global features is the person laying on a beach towel. One of the global features is like, I don't know, the lifeguard tower. So it's just a feature that's in the dot matrix that is created by all the little dots put together. So it's a big picture element of the composite. It's something formed by the dots. It doesn't have to be the whole picture though. And also, Jason, it would not be correct to say what it is supposed to represent in the singular as though it's only representing one thing, like it's just one, you know, object that's shown in the image. So anyway, when the dots combine, they form structures, or like in the case of the picture, larger scale composites that are formed from the little dots. Now, tell me this, if we had a second dot matrix, okay, and we compared it with one, and it had all the same exact placement and arrangement of each dot. So it was a dot for dot duplicate. If that dot matrix B is identically arranged to dot matrix A, then what would it be like when it's compared with A? You understand me? We have A with whatever features established by the little dots. Suppose we have a second one with the same arrangement of dots. Okay, good, Eva, Cameron. The second one would be exactly the same, and so it would bear all the same global features. Okay, what number is this again? The number we're talking about is number 65. Okay, number 65. You see it here, hopefully there in the study guide list. Explains supervenience physicalism. But can we return to this? So you've got two dot matrices with the same arranged dots, so they're going to have the same global features. So the point is that if the underlying array of dots are the same, then the global features are going to have to also be the same. Now, this becomes an analogy to the physical universe. What's the comparison? The physical universe can be seen as somewhat similar to the dot matrix because this universe, according to physicalism, is a big composite structure, and it's also made out of tiny little things, but they're not ink dots, so they're not pixels. What is the corollary to those little dots in physical space? Atoms, yes, little atoms of matter. So what physicalism says is that everything in the universe supervenes on the placement and order and arrangement of atoms. So, can you complete this thought by telling me about the hypothetical second universe? That's how you have to finish this example. So if there was a second universe, which was what? Can you fill in the rest of that thought, complete that thought? And you just have to model it on the same explanation I gave of these images. Yeah, so it would be exactly the same, but if what, Jason? Just one thing you gotta say. If the other universe had the same atomic facts, the same order of atoms, then it would have to have all the same global features as we have in our universe. So our universe is basically a bunch of atoms putting stuff together and forming objects. Even us and our consciousness is just the outcome of the arrangement of atoms that form our body and brain and our brain waves and stuff. So if there was a second universe which had all the same atomic facts arranged identically, then it would have the same historical phenomena, the same psychological phenomena, the same like copies of people and whatever thoughts, experiences, and feelings they have. So when you have thoughts, feelings, experiences, it's just the playing out of the atoms that form your body. And in case there were another closed physical system with the same kind of atomic facts, then there would be a duplicate even of you and of everything you've ever thought or felt. Okay, so you have to kind of just describe the analogy between the dot matrix and how it's built out of dots, and if there were two of them with the same dots, they would have the same big features, to the case of the universe, which could be thought of as a similar thing, a big structure made out of little atoms, and if there were another universe with the same atoms arranged, then it would also give rise to the exact same, you know, macroscopic phenomena. Okay, so very good, that's 65. I'm going back to see that Eva asked about number 52. So let me get into this. Time moving, why is it a paradox? Okay, I don't know, why is it? That's according to Theodore Sider. Why does he say that the idea of time moving is something that is confusing and paradoxical? Let me know. What's wrong with saying time moves? I mean, everyone thinks that, but according to this author, it's not really so straightforward and clear. Well, good, Jason, because it just sits there kind of like space. That's correct, but that's something that he only mentions a little further down. At first, he just says, we can't really explain what it means for time to move because there's this kind of circularity in trying to explain the movement of time. What are we referring to here? Because if something moves at all, like through space, tell me what's the definition of moving? For something to move from point A to point B, it has to do what? We're talking about motion, yes, but for things to move, okay, better, Jason. For things to move, they have to be in different places at different times. They have to change their position over time. So guys, you gotta go back to that Ted Sider. Look at his discussion of his train that starts off in, I don't remember, Boston, and then it ends up in Washington, D.C. at the end. The graph that he shows on the page in his article showcases like that at one time the train is in one city. At a subsequent later time, it's in another city. So to show that a thing moves, you have to show that at various different subsequent times, it's in different positions. If it had stayed at the one station throughout all four of those times, then that's not a moving train. That's a train that's just sitting still. So the definition of movement through space is for a thing to be in different places at different times. If we say that time moves, then that would mean that time is in different places at different times. But that is now a circular definition because notice that the word time has been invoked in the definition of how it moves. So we don't have like some kind of non-circular coherent analysis of it. Another attempt to try and define the movement of time is to say that the present moment is moving. But this is really no better, he says, because if the present moment is moving, then that means that the present moment is in different places at different times. And once again, it looks like we're trying to bootstrap our way to some analysis of how it moves by smuggling in the idea of time once again into the definition. So to say that time moves by being in different places at different times is not a satisfying definition because it makes use of the term itself in the definition. So the only way he thinks to avoid these puzzles of circularity and paradox is to reject the idea that time moves. Instead, it doesn't move. It sits there with all of the moments of space jointly containing it. So space and time collect and hold all the moments as one big block, as some call it. Okay, so like time moving is a paradox because for something to move, it has to be in different places at different times. But we can't use the word time in its own definition. Or if we do, we lead to an infinite regress. We might have to define like a second order sense of time within which the first order concept is moving. And then that would reiterate over and over again infinitely. So that's the idea behind what question 52. And again, that's all Ted Sider, Theodore Sider. You can see all the discussion as well in reference to the textbook or the earlier lectures on all the topics. Okay, so let's go ahead. We still got about 15 minutes. 68, no causal closure, yes. So Daniel Stoljar, he defends physicalism and he's a physicalist. One of the arguments that he gives to support physicalism is this one, the argument from causal closure. So the argument overall has 3 premises that lead to the ultimate conclusion. Maybe someone will tell me what some of those premises are, starting with the first one. So yeah, causal closure argument, Daniel Stoljar, clearly set down in our notes. So let's hear it. What's that first premise? It starts off with something like every event which has a cause has a physical cause. Yes, that's the first premise of the argument. After this, what's the second premise say? Okay, mental events can cause physical events. Correct, that is the second premise. Every event that has a cause has a physical cause. Number 2, mental events can cause physical events. And then number 3 is the one that's a little tricky, but we need to know it because it's key to the argument. What is the third important premise of that argument? We have the first 2 from Eva here. What's that third one? Every event that has a cause has a physical cause. Mental events can cause physical events. And, okay, now this one. If an event A causes event B, then there is no other event C which is different from A and which also causes B. Okay, now, from those 3 premises, the conclusion follows. And the conclusion ultimately is what statement? Once you say that, then the whole argument will be written here in this comment. Every event that has a cause, physical. Mental events can cause physical events. If A causes B, it's the only cause of B. And so, therefore, mental events are physical events. Correct. Now, if this question was selected, though, it would not be 100% perfect if you just verbatim copied the argument without any commentary on the premises. Okay, so you should explain in some little bit of additional detail what each premise is actually saying. Okay, so the first premise is every event that has a cause has a physical cause, meaning that since we live in a physical universe, if something happens, there had to be a physical cause behind it at least. The second premise says the mental events can cause physical events. That just refers to the idea that you can, by thinking, generate behavior and action. So if I say to myself right now, snap your fingers, then I can just do it by thinking so. So thought can lead to action or behavior. That's what it means for a mental event to cause a physical event. My hand going up right now is physical. That's like a physical hand that's going physically up. But it's caused by my thought in the mind. Raise your hand. Okay? So that's the second premise. It just says that thought can generate a physical action that we can observe. Now, the third premise is saying that if something is the cause of something else, it is the one and only cause. There can't be a second one. So if A causes B, it's just A. It's not anything else like labeled C or whatever. It's just A. So the combination of these three premises leads to the conclusion that mental events just are physical events. Because from premise 2, your mind can cause your body to do stuff. From premise 1, though, everything that has a cause has a physical cause. So when your mind causes your actions, it's the brain doing it physically. And what the third premise is saying is, since the physical brain is known to be a cause of your observed behavior, this is the only cause. It's not that it's both your brain, but also something that's not physical at all, like your soul. So that would be to add an additional cause that doesn't do any explanatory work. Therefore, it's unnecessary to postulate the existence of some non-physical mind. Okay, so go ahead, let's move on. We still have some time. And so let's know what's your next preferred topic we can go into. Whichever item that you want me to refer to, I'm happy to do that. Okay, 54, Cameron. Why do they say that nothing changes based on the space-time theory? Okay, good. So according to the space-time theory, all the space-time points are all laid out. So every event, every moment, everything that could happen that ever does happen, it's already there. Everything's real already. All the events of the entire universe and all time currently exist all at once, as it were. So why, according to this view, would we say nothing really changes? Why do we say then nothing changes? Like, so if I shave my head today and then I come in on Friday to the meeting with, like a bald head, you might say, wow, he really changed his appearance. How come, according to space-time theory, that's not really the exactly accurate way to put it, that I've changed or that something has changed? What would it be to say there's not been any change? Just, twist your brain into like a pretzel. Tell me what you think I'm talking about. Nothing's changing. Why not? Okay, so it's a moment in time. So in principle, it can't change because of the graph. Well, maybe it's a little hard to explain, Jason, but you're trying, and that's what I want. So in the space-time theory, yeah, exactly, Eva. In the space-time theory, all the moments in your whole timeline all exist. So you guys, sometimes you use Twitter and stuff and you have a timeline there. Well, think about the timeline of your whole life. I'm not talking about when you make like a new post on a social media feed, but like just existing the whole time, like whatever, even you right now, that's part of that timeline. According to the space-time theory, the timeline of everything is already there. You don't know at this present moment, this temporal part of you, you're not able to access the future time points, but they're there and they're already in existence. So if the full like stretched out extended timeline is real, then all the moments within it are real, including the things that are going to happen relative to you now later. So like the part of me with the longer hair is on that timeline at this point in the sequence. The part that has not got the hair after the cut is also on its designated point in the same sequence. But the whole sequence of events entirely, it just sits there and it doesn't change. So in a way, the idea of change is like an illusion. There's just a sequence of temporal parts, but each individual one doesn't undergo any alteration or change. And so that's kind of the idea. Things don't really change, but we could describe change as qualitative difference of different temporal parts of the same object. So like, when I was a little baby, I was very small compared to me now. But on the space-time theory, that baby temporal part of my timeline was always sitting there at that size. And this later on mature adult part of the timeline has always been sitting at this point with this size. So it's not like there's one object undergoing changes. There's a whole bunch of temporal parts throughout the sequence, none of which undergo any change. Okay, so that's the idea of this 54. So we can continue. Very good. So what's next? $45. Let's see here. Classical account of knowledge. Well, it's not short though, Jason. I mean, if you just say justified true belief, it's not going to get very many points. because you have to say what each one of those terms mean, right? And then you have to explain why knowledge is not possible unless you have each one. So you would also furthermore have to give hypothetical scenarios where a person satisfies some but not all. And then you, the student, have to say, common sense tells you that in a situation such as this is not knowledge. Okay, so what are the three conditions of knowledge? You don't have to refute it, no, but you do have to explain it just in the first place. So what is the definition? Justified true belief. Okay, define each word. What does it mean to have a proposition be true? And give an example. What is true? What does the word true mean? Definition. The proposition matches reality. Okay, give example. Say something true. Say a fact. Facts only. Come on. The sky's blue. Maybe right now it's blue, but in the night it's black. Maybe a different one. I know that's a common example. It's like the first thing you think of, sky's blue. But how about something about like, no, Senna, I like the idea of 2 + 2 is 4, but it's not the good example for the whatever correspondence theory of truth, because there's nothing that we can compare the statement to. Okay, the earth is round. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. That's a fact. If we say that, we're not just saying it, it's the way the shape of the planet actually is. How about something having to do with history? Let's do another one. Just making sure that we're all clear about what it means for sentences to be true. Something about history, world history. You're like, nothing's true in history. There's no facts. No, come on. Something that happened. George Washington was the first president. Okay, that's true. Yeah, fair enough. So anyway, these are things that you're saying, but they're not just false statements. They correspond to the facts. So that's what it means for something to be true. What about a belief? What does it mean to believe something? We have to go in this order because you have to first basically define what truth is, and then from there you can define belief. When a person thinks something is true, okay, good. So I bet you that you believe that George Washington was the first president because you were taught that in school, and that means you think that that's really what happened. People can have different beliefs about the same topic. Like there could be some weird people that don't believe the earth is round. Like they just don't think that's really true. And other people, of course, would say, no, of course it is, and I believe that it is round. So beliefs can be different, but the facts are just what they are. Now, what's justification? What's justification? One more. Justification. Evidence that you have that backs your belief. It is the evidence, but it's you having the evidence, right? It's like you being aware of the evidence that supports the belief. So the ancient Greeks believed that when you've got knowledge, all three of these conditions are there. You believe something is true, it is true, and you've got reasonable evidence to support what you think is true. So that's the definition. To give further intuitive support for it, you could give like an example. Suppose someone believes something, but it's not true. Clearly they don't know it. You can give an example. Like a person fills in the wrong answer on their test. They're not going to get credit for knowing the answer because that was not the true answer. Or you could give a case where someone has a true belief, but they don't have any reason to think it's true. Like they just had a random lucky guess. You'd say, okay, well, they got the answer right, but they didn't actually know it because they were not aware of the reason that it was right. Okay, so anyways, that's stuff that you might want to go over if this was chosen on the test. We're getting into the end of our review session for today's Wednesday meeting, but maybe we have time for like another, if you want, question. I don't know. Just it's up to you. We've still got our Friday session, and we have holding office hours Friday as well. But let me know. There's still some time if you want to go over maybe one more. 77. Okay. Analogy between the soul and the state. So Plato has this big description of how if you want to live your life in the best way, then you should try to mirror the structure of the best possible society, which is his republic. If you guys remember, this is like one of the very recent lectures. He says there's a three-way division of the soul or the state. And he says that the three parts of the soul are kind of similar to the three parts of the state. He also says that the way that they should be balanced and harmonious is also similar. And then the virtue that should be exhibited by each of the three parts is also similar or the same. So we can go over more depth of this maybe as we begin next time, but maybe someone would just throw out a couple of basic points, like what are the three parts of the state that he talks about? It's blank, blank, blank. What are those three parts? So okay, merchants, warriors, kings. And you'd give like a brief little description of what each one is all about. The merchants, what do? They produce goods and services that they that they sell or trade for profit. Kind of like just working people, business people. And then there's warriors. What are their job? To provide for defense and security, to defend the republic, like police or military. And then the kings, what are they? Those are like the equivalent of the heads of state, the leadership of the society that make the laws and that have authority to order the warriors to fight if needed. Now, in each of those three parts, there's a virtue. The virtue of merchants, if they're good merchants, is temperance, meaning self-control, moderation, so that they don't become too greedy in their pursuit of profit. Warriors, they should have courage, meaning that they're willing to face danger when it's right and when it's needed, not being scared to do that. That's what they need to be good fighters. And kings should have wisdom, meaning that they need intelligence and good judgment so that they can weigh evidence carefully and make the right decisions based on that. To the individual soul, we have three parts, and he says they kind of match these three. One part is just a few seconds left here, but I'll just throw it out at you, and maybe we can go over it in more depth next time. But the human soul, it's got appetitive, spirited, and rational, and that is merchant, warriors, and kings, respectively, by comparison. Your appetitive part is the appetites and desires that you want to fulfill. Your spirited part is your passion, pride, competitiveness. The rational part of you is the calm, reasonable deliberator that makes good decisions based on evidence. So those three parts should all have the same virtue. You should have temperance for your appetites, courage for your spirited nature, and wisdom for your rational nature. And they should all be under the leadership of reason. They shouldn't try to overthrow it, and they should work cooperatively together. If you do that, then your life will go just as well as the ideal republic in the same situation. Okay, so pretty good first crack at the review session today, everyone. Thanks so much for attending and for helping to participate. So now I'm going to end this Zoom meeting, and then right after that, I'm going to also end the YouTube live session. So if you want to go back and see this review session later, you'll still find it on our YouTube channel. But I wanted to do the dual platform so that we could benefit from having the shared screen. So thanks again, everyone. Take care, and I'll be in touch, and I'll see you on Friday. Okay, bye-bye. Ending the Zoom meeting. And then over here to my YouTubers, I see some of you are still here. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you back on Friday.